Greetings, innovators and leaders. This is AI for the C-Suite, your compass for navigating the exponential age. I'm Chad Harvey, and we're here to bring you cutting-edge insights on AI tailored specifically for middle-market organizations. Buckle up as we embark on a journey through the transformative world of artificial intelligence. Today, we welcome Brendan Norman, co-founder and CEO of Classify, a company that's reimagining how the digital world organizes and monetizes content in the age of AI. Brendan's journey in ad tech reads like a roadmap of the industry's evolution. He was a founding client partner at Facebook, where he helped scale the audience network from zero to a $3 billion business. He then moved to Unity Technologies, playing a key role in their successful IPO. Then, when privacy changes like iOS 14.5 and cookie deprecation disrupted traditional audience targeting, Brendan spotted an opportunity that others missed. He discovered that tools to accurately classify and find specific content at the page level simply didn't exist. So, he assembled a team of data scientists and AI engineers to build Classify from the ground up. Today, Classify's AI-powered classification engine helps publishers increase revenue and advertisers find the right inventory without relying on personal data. But Brendan isn't stopping there. He's also working with the IAB Tech Lab on something that should interest every exec thinking about AI's future: building protocols for content monetization in the emerging world of AI agents. Brendan brings a unique perspective on how middle-market companies can leverage AI agents, improve operational efficiencies, and prepare for a fundamentally different landscape. Brendan, welcome to AI for the C-Suite.
Hey, Chad, thank you. That was an amazing introduction.
Well, hopefully we can just continue to raise the bar and it'll get even better from there. So let's dive right in with a very specific, kind of geeky question. I'm going to have you explain and give some context for folks that don't understand these terms. Can you first please explain for us what contextual targeting is versus audience targeting? And then let's have a little conversation around that. So first, educate our folks here. What are we talking about?
Yeah, great framing of that question. So, thinking about the whole advertising marketing landscape, there's a lot of different touch points to serve ads. And I don't know what the stat is, but it's every human, or at least every American, that's kind of going through our day-to-day life sees thousands, if not tens of thousands of ads every single day. You don't always notice those things. Your shirt for AI for your podcast right now, all over the place. We're always seeing ads. And when you think about targeting, a billboard, everybody sees a billboard. There's really not much targeting other than kind of guessing what cars might be driving down the road and who happen to might be looking up at that moment to see your billboard. So that's more of like a brand style, very wide approach. Let's just have something out there. In the digital marketing world, it can be a lot more precise because we just have access to a lot more data. And you asked about kind of two parts of targeting, which are audience and then contextual. The audience is knowing who the person is or a group of people are that you want to run an ad campaign for. And then the contextual side is understanding what content that ad is actually showing up on. So if you're reading a New York Times article, about a specific, something like the World Series, what we do and what contextual targeting does is it understands that article at a deep semantic level, and it helps the right advertisers understand how to run targeting against that specific piece of content. And those two things actually can work very well in conjunction with each other. They're not mutually exclusive. Some of the limitations on the audience side, though, are privacy is really important. And then the way that audience targeting works, we invented, things like cookies and retargeting, which are, little bits of code that kind of live on your browser and different web pages and kind of help. Ideally, they were supposed to help create an abstraction layer and some privacy safe ways so that advertisers can pinpoint who you are and kind of follow you around the web. But over time, sophisticated companies have figured out ways to kind of build profiles on people and bucket people into these audiences. And it is still a very effective way to target. Although that's really only one half of the battle. And the reason that we chose to focus on contextual is it hadn't been done very well. So computers and technology, when it would read an article, would basically, have the limitation of saying this entire article is just about, back to the baseball analogy, just about sports or just about, baseball. When we're reading an article, and the cool thing is technology has evolved, pretty quickly to allow this to happen. One, at a very high level of accuracy, and then two, at a very high level of scale. So now we can read an article and like really deeply understand all the sentiment, all the different nuances to the context, pull out everything around what teams are we talking about, what players are we talking about, are we talking about different brands, are we talking positively and negatively about certain things, when all of that is happening in the certain article. And what that does is it allows advertisers to just be a lot more precise where they're running an ad. And to kind of finish up that thought, like the reason that contextual is so important, and I think it's been overlooked in the industry for a long time, is that when anybody is reading an article, when you're watching a TV show, when you're listening to a podcast, for you, if we're listening about AI, we're thinking about AI and technology. That's a great time to serve an ad for something that's relevant to this podcast. Would you want to serve an ad for, a new beer brand or a pair of shoes in this podcast? Maybe. But would it be a lot more relevant if somebody's already thinking about AI and they're thinking about, targeting, they're thinking about marketing? Is that a good time for us to run an ad or another company in this space? Much more likely, because I'm already thinking about that product or service, and that's the best time, to serve somebody that ad. So it's a long-winded explanation for kind of understanding the audience side and the contextual side.
No, I think that's a good explanation, and maybe we do want to run a beer ad, because I talked to a lot of folks, and it seems like AI is driving them to drink. They're like, I just can't wrap my head around it. So, more on that later. I think that was really good fundamental contextual setting here about those two different types of advertising approaches. And my understanding is that there has been a shift that's going on, and if I'm let's just say a middle market executive, and my CMO is coming to me and they're asking me questions about where we want to have our ad spend allocated. And maybe it's a false choice to say that the choice is between contextual targeting versus audience targeting. What do I need to know to be informed about that when somebody comes to me and they want to have this conversation? Because maybe in my mind, ad spend is just ad spend. I don't know.
The industry has kind of had the approach of ad spend is ad spend. We need to we've got a budget, we've got to spend that budget. We want to drive a good outcome. There's been a recent shift towards outcomes, and what that really means, it's a big topic to think about outcomes, but at the end of the day, it's the value that you're creating for that budget you're putting in. A lot of that budget ends up getting taken out by supply side platforms, demand side platforms, data providers, measurement providers, and a lot of different other folks along the way. And, recently I was reading a stat that if an advertiser spends $1 on the publisher at New York Times or whoever, we'll end up only seeing somewhere between 35 to 40 cents of that dollar, because so many people are taking, little pieces along the way. And there's a big discussion right now in the industry around, I guess, the inefficiencies with respect to how everything has been designed. So there's a lot of new technology being created, and you mentioned IB Tech Lab. Yes, we're developing some really interesting new ways that publishers can protect more of their content, so that content, they can monetize it, especially when LLMs and other AI systems are grabbing that and then using it outside of their platform. The other interesting new technology is called the Ad Context Protocol. And what it's doing is it's enabling different agentic systems to talk back and forth. So, for example, if I'm an ad agency and I'm running an ad for, let's go back to the beer campaign. I'm running a beer campaign. Today, I might have my own in-house intelligence platform that connects out to, and this might get really complicated for your listeners, but connects out to a demand-side platform. And hopefully this illustrates just how complex the whole landscape is. The demand-side platform that connects to a supply side platform, deal ID. And on the supply side, that deal ID can include something like a contextual targeting segment. It can include an audience targeting segment. It could include some other layers in like brand safety, brand suitability. Although really good contextual providers already take that into account. So a lot of the time, they're actually not really needed. They kind of cancel each other out. What this new ad context protocol enables is a lot of these different systems to just communicate in a much more standardized and efficient way. So startups or earlier stage companies or companies that are need to have and manage a lot of different API connections that are very custom and complicated and take a lot of time to manage, now have a much more standardized way to kind of have all these systems talk to each other. And I guess back to your question, what's really exciting right now is this new ad context protocol. Everybody's kind of figuring out how do we continue to build more use cases across signals agents, which is what we do, sales agents, creative agents. And the agent side effectively is another layer of logic that kind of automates a lot of the very manual things that people have been doing for a long time. So going and building a campaign, choosing which targeting providers you want to use, building creative, figuring out the bidding strategy and all the logic. When you're working with an agent, which is an AI, it's effectively doing a lot of that for you. And I think it's cool because when you set up the logic for your agent, you still have a lot of manual control over what actually happens, but it facilitates your ability to kind of think a lot more strategically and just do a lot more work while you have an agent that's in the background, taking care of a lot of the things that would normally be very manual and time consuming.
Okay. For those of us that don't come from an advertising background and maybe don't have the depth and the breadth of knowledge that you've got, was there a light bulb moment when you saw that things were changing in a pretty dramatic way? I know when we spoke before in advance of our recording session, you talked about the privacy changes, and I alluded to it in the intro, that came about from iOS 14.5. Was that a main catalyst here for you in this understanding of how things are changing? Was there something else? Maybe just kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Anything in the mobile app space, I think it's a factor. And so with Classify specifically, we chose to focus more on open web, desktop inventory, mobile web inventory, and things like iOS, are more concentrated in the app ecosystem and or the mobile ecosystem. So they're tangential. But to your question around kind of seeing some of the trends, I had been building another platform that was completely outside of the ad tech space. And that's what led me, to put together this team of folks to kind of solve this problem. I built this platform to connect. I got really into backcountry ski touring 5 years ago, and built a platform to connect guides with people like me who wanted to meet guides, hire guides to take them out, all across the world. And when I reached out to a bunch of different companies to run targeting for how do I market this new platform, and asked folks to find the right websites to run that targeting against, it was very high level and it was very categorical. So skiing content or like winter sports content, which is cool, but it includes a whole lot of stuff that's not super, super relevant to exactly what I wanted to target. And that's what led me down the path of figuring out, like, how do we do this? And the answer was using some more sophisticated technology and kind of building from the ground up some AI native technology that's able to read a whole article, understand that article, and embed a whole bunch of different attributes into that article page by page that allows us to surface much more specific contextual targeting. And then on top of that is the ability to just write in a prompt like you would in ChatGPT and, come to us using our agent and say, I want to run ads for this platform to find people who are interested in backcountry ski touring. And then, boom, we get a list of the very specific web pages at the URL level of everything across the web about where those ads should run. And then we can create a deal ID and start trafficking ads for that platform, directly through the deal ID.
Very interesting. I want to shift, maybe it's sideways a little bit here. You talked about the ad context protocol. How does that pertain? Because I don't, I know that MCP and model context protocol is still kind of percolating out into the collective conscious of most execs, especially in mid-market land. And I want to make sure that folks aren't confusing those two things. So explain to me ad context protocol, which you were talking about earlier, versus model context protocol. And do those two things overlap? What's that mean? If I'm an exec, I'm hearing these terms for the first time. What is that all about?
Very much. We just actually published an article. One of my co-founder and CTO, Dr. Nick Ross, who runs the data science clinic at University of Chicago and is PhD in machine learning and data science. Just published an article on Ad Exchanger, which should still be up at the top. It was, I think, on Monday, and it kind of goes into depth about what MCP is, also what AdCP is. And to answer that question in a bit more depth, but not overly technical, because read the article, it's a very good explanation. MCP is kind of designed to standardize APIs. And at the end of the day, it's a better way to kind of connect different systems together using slightly different technology. AdCP is built on that basic premise of MCP. So they're not, ultimately like dissimilar, although there's definitely some standardization involved and also some customization that we've had to do to align it more towards the advertising use case. So things like, those three things that I mentioned, signals agents, creative agents, and sales agents. Definitely some customization around how these different agentic experiences or different agentic platforms can talk to each other. But it's all basically built on the back end of MCP, which is, like you just mentioned, Anthropic's new protocol for how agents and LLMs can talk back and forth together in a very standardized way.
Is either ACP from an ad context or MCP something that a CIO of a middle market company needs to be thinking about when they're evaluating AI tools, or is this all still too early stage?
I think it depends on the use case. For advertising, it's cool because it's going to allow these systems to be much more interoperable and accessible, deployable everywhere. From a CIO perspective, I think every CIO should be up to date on, all these new trends as they're happening. MCP is specifically from Anthropic, and it's, an open source protocol. Who knows if OpenAI will release one or if Google will release one, TBD. But it seems like the industry, it's been out for about a year, and the industry has, really popped up around organizing itself around this protocol. So yeah, I would say absolutely be very aware, get involved. And the cool thing about AdCP is we've got a pretty thriving community of a whole bunch of different companies. And it's, what I think is really cool is we're getting to work with a lot of our partners. So PubMatic's in this group, Scope 3. It's originally founded by Brian O'Kelly from Scope 3 and originally AppNexus. Yahoo, there's a bunch of ad agencies, a bunch of other signals and sales agents. So there's, I think, 30 companies or so that are kind of these launch members or founding partners. And this Slack channel's expanded, 600-700 people in the Slack channel right now. So very actively just kind of figuring out how do we as a community across a whole bunch of different applications design these new protocols and technologies to be able to have these systems connect. And we're all kind of doing it together, which is, I think, is pretty cool.
Very cool. I agree. All right. I need to preface my next question with maybe a caveat or a disclaimer for an episode that you haven't heard yet because we're recording this before it's published. But I've recorded an episode with David Ebner of Classify. They're a creative consultancy shop. And one of his theses is that while AI and bots will continue to rise and consume content, he still thinks that there is a role for human consumption of long form content, particularly on the web. So I gotta point that out before I ask this question because there's an embedded assumption here. One of the things I think is that AI agents are going to become the primary consumers of content. And you are building protocols specifically for content monetization in the agentic AI era. So here's my question. Paint us, or maybe it's an open field question, if you will. Paint a picture for us. What does content monetization look like when AI agents are the primary consumers of content? Or maybe you would agree with David as well that humans are still going to be the primary consumers. But my position is probably that AI agents are going to be the primary consumers. So what's that content monetization look like in this new agentic AI age?
If anybody absolutely knew the answer to that question, you'd have a time machine fast forwarding to the future.
Oh, you don't have an answer at the ready for me?
But I have some assumptions and more frameworks around how I would think through answering that question, and they're kind of based on history. So primary consumers of that content, likely yes, but I also think that we will see a flight towards more high quality content. And I was chatting with another friend who's an ad exchanger, and she's a reporter, chatting with her on Monday at the Marketecture event, and we started chatting about a very similar topic to this. And I said, I actually think your job is going to become a lot more valuable in that there's going to be a lot of AI slop that exists. There's going to be a lot of poor quality content written or regurgitated. A lot of people now use ChatGPT or use other AI writing platforms to generate content that then they publish under their own name. But I strongly believe that really good reporters, really good journalists, really good content creators, whether that's in the news side, whether that's in the influencer side or content creator side, whether that's traditional TV and film, photography, I think that there will be a flight towards more really high quality professionalism. And the same kind of a thing happened when Instagram was released, 12, 13 years ago. I remember a lot of friends in the photography space were terrified that all of a sudden everybody with an iPhone, was going to be taking pictures and uploading things, and the value of their work would decrease because there was so many new pictures, and so people's attention was people Instagram was fighting for people's attention, and that it was going to be distracted away from the high quality stuff. And while there will be a lot more content on the market, I think that we'll naturally gravitate towards the really high quality stuff. So to your question, agents will absolutely be consuming everything all the time. Of course, and humans will also be consuming that content too. So I think working with publishers, back to that question on the content monetization side, one of the things that ad tech has probably not done a great job of, which I'm happy to see that there's a trend in this direction, is to just work with publishers in terms of understanding how we're helping them build the right tools that protect the work that goes into creating that content, however it gets consumed. If it's consumed, on a traditional type of website or AR, if it's consumed in another platform like an AI browser or through a chatbot, whatever that looks like, I don't know how people will start to change their content consumption form factor. But whatever it is, the content itself will be the valuable thing, and making sure that the folks who are building that content, publishing that content, however they do so, have the right tools to protect, their own monetization so that they can get, fairly compensated. So it is cool to be in that conversation because it's very early in figuring and structuring all of this. But my assumption is it will be a drive towards quality, and it will be a drive towards making sure that, we have that fine balance of, I used the example earlier of an advertiser puts $1 in, the publisher makes, 35 to 40 cents. I would like to see the publisher making a lot more than 35 to 40 cents, something that's a lot more fair. And I think a lot of this new technology will help enable that.
I love how you went directly to the issue of higher quality content. And listeners of our show, I think, are going to be ones where that resonates. There are a lot of other companies, and we've seen this play out time and time again through history, when there are technological changes that don't take the changes seriously and they don't move fast enough. So what do you think is at stake here for the companies that don't adapt their content strategy, that don't move as swiftly as they should into that high quality realm?
It'll be tough. It's always a fight for people's attention, right? We all only have 24 hours in a day. We're all distracted. We're all looking at multiple screens, and a lot of the time, it used to be you would read a newspaper, and that was your attention. You would just read the text on the page. You weren't multitasking and also listening to radio, and other things at the same time. Now we kind of do, like, we have a lot of screens open at the same time, and attention is fragmented. So maybe there's an argument to be said that, like, from that 24 hours in a day, because of multiple screens at the same time, maybe it is actually a little bit longer, but we still only have a limited amount of time. And I think it will be, a fight towards just the right. And I know that consumer behavior has trended towards more of, instead of very high quality produced content, like, there's now a lot more creator content, which is high quality in itself, away from traditional type of scripted TV or scripted film, scripted or high quality journalism. So there's a lot more just content that exists today. But what it does is it really elevates the competition to make sure that, whatever you are producing, because distribution, like, the barriers to entry have been democratized and they're so low. Like, anybody can go out and buy a camera or start writing something and publish that and get exposure fairly quickly. That's really cool. And it also drives a lot of competition in the space towards making sure that whatever you are creating, it is of value. And I think what's also cool is there's a lot of tools, a lot of really interesting tools to understand and measure why certain content works well. Long term, one of the things that we're building is this classify. So we do contextual targeting. We also do classification to help understand content, and the underlying technology is called our content graph. Facebook has, the social graph. Google has their knowledge graph, and there's some other companies that have things like intent graphs. We are building, or we've built, a content graph that effectively helps to, like, really deeply understand why content. Actually, I'll clarify that. It's funny to say this because I haven't actually been talking about this more publicly, but it's kind of the back-end technology that supports our ability to run contextual targeting. But through this really deep understanding of, every single piece of content, starting with just the open web and web pages, but, expanding into things like video and audio and other form factors, we have a very good understanding of all the different, nuances, all the different sentiment and context within a piece of content. And I think that will just become increasingly valuable, not only for publishers to help understand why certain things work well, so that they can focus on generating more of that type of content, but also, on the advertiser side and other applications for things like LLMs or the Gen AI world, really deeply understanding the signals about content. I think folks that are investing in that space will become increasingly more valuable.
If I'm not mistaken, when we spoke earlier before this call, I think you referred to this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you referred to all this as high fidelity curation, I believe is the phrase that you used. And I'm interested, what are, in your opinion, beyond advertising, say knowledge management or even internal operations, what are some of the applications of what you're talking about here?
Curation, I'll jump into that quick, because curation is something that the industry, is discussing around how is that defined. Curation, sell-side decisioning. There's a lot of debate about what that all means. I guess my definition is really anybody who's helping an advertiser figure out which pieces of content that their ad should run on. It's kind of targeting at the end of the day. To your question around applications for just organizing content, I mean, there are so many. Like, we built this very powerful tool that I think will have a lot broader applications eventually, once we have time to think about, expanding outside of the ad tech ecosystem and outside of the content ecosystem. But any large repositories of lots of different data, lots of different pages, whether it's in the pharmaceutical world, whether it's in the finance world. Any large repository has lots of content. Understanding that and making it organized and then searchable really quickly, a content graph is a very powerful application for that. So I would turn that question back around. Do you have any additional thoughts or for your audience? If you guys have more thoughts, I would love to chat once we have more bandwidth to think about other applications for this.
I would absolutely invite our audience, and we'll share your contact information both in the show notes as well as at the end of our recording here. But I would encourage our audience to reach out to you, because my sense is that we are going to have more internal content for organizations in addition to the externally type of curated content that you're talking about. And I think that's just going to do nothing but accelerate in the age of AI. And so what comes to mind for me, Brendan, is I believe it's the example is Airbnb. If I'm not mistaken, they originally built that application as a way for people that were going to conferences to hook up and share a hotel room. And then they positioned that very, very differently once they saw what the potential was. And I see the same type of parallel here with what you're talking about with what you built at Classify. I feel like you've got a laser focus on a problem you're trying to solve here with respect to the ad world. However, there's this huge, unfathomably large bucket of content that organizations have firewalled inside their own domains that I don't think they have a very good handle on how to organize, curate, make sense of, and reduce waste and get ROI from. So,
Would love to continue the conversation.
Fair enough.
Things is, as an early stage founder of a company with limited resources, I love exploring the potential of, you built something really powerful, and we all kind of come from this domain in the advertising and marketing world. And it was originally developed to solve this one problem. But to your point, all the time, Slack was originally a messaging tool that they built, to solve a whole different thing. The company started off in a very different direction.
Yeah, they were building video games or something, weren't they?
They were building video games, and they invented a faster way to just communicate so they could talk about development of their own thing. And to your point, realized actually the thing that we just built inside is a really powerful platform that we could, help other folks use. And then they had a great go-to-market strategy and built this gigantic company that got acquired. So to your point, yes, I, as a founder, try to make some time to think about how else could this be used? And I don't know yet. It would be really cool to have other folks come and kind of help do that. But right now, we're kind of laser focused on helping advertisers find the right content, that drives value for them. It reduces waste. And then, other folks that we do classification for some large supply side platforms on the content side and also on the product and the commerce side. So that's another application that kind of sits in this world. But to your point, would love to have additional ideas once we have the bandwidth to think about expansion.
All right. Well, I invite our listeners to knock on your door with a very large check and several petabytes or terabytes of data and see what can happen. So, all right, let's refocus on digital advertising. You've seen this industry now from multiple vantage points, right? First at Facebook and Unity, now at Classify. I'm interested, how do you think the future of digital ads and digital advertising will become less fragmented and more optimized? Where's all this heading?
Back to the ad CP stuff. I'm very, cautiously optimistic that there's a lot of interest, and the fact that it's a consortium, the fact that it's a lot of folks from around the industry that are invested in reducing the inefficiencies, and proving out that this works. I think the very first kind of buying happened a couple weeks ago during this big webinar. We're very actively involved as a community about expanding it. And we're already working with quite a few partners to just run tests and validate that the technology works, that it is solving the problems that we set out to solve. So to answer that question, one, new technology does help support all of this. And I think that, as folks, every time there's an economic down cycle, budgets get tighter, It's usually a forcing function to just be a lot more deliberate and efficient in how you're deploying capital. In really good times, folks are usually a little less budget conscious, and they're willing to, kind of see a lot more waste. But as the whole ecosystem grows and expands, I mean, I think that, there is a lot of earlier companies like us, that are just kind of tired of seeing all this inefficiency in the space and have built new technology that really proves very quickly, when you're applying contextual targeting, we average, 2 to 3 times better click-through rates just by adding a classified contextual segment. And already that's like a pretty powerful thing. Sometimes when it's custom, it's up to 30 times better CTR, which is crazy. And that's just by helping the right ad show up against the right piece of content without all the extra waste. So as we just continue, kind of moving through this, and you're seeing some of these case studies happen, some of these examples of how powerful new technologies can be. Folks on the client side, are getting more excited about the value, and then folks on the publisher side are getting a lot more excited about, what the revenue potential is. The other missing piece to all that is the user experience. And back to that original concept that I talked about, where when you're in the mindset of reading an article about baseball, and it's a good time to serve you an ad that's relevant to that specific thing, or listening to a podcast about AI, it also creates a better user experience. And that also drives engagement. So all of these things are important. And if you think about, your podcast as, one entire product and piece of content, and if you're monetizing that with ads, if it's taking somebody completely away from what they're already thinking about and they have to jump back into this conversation that we're having right now, it's disruptive. But if it's something that sounds a lot more specific to like the specific conversation that we're having, one, they're probably a lot more interested. It's going to drive better engagement, and ideally, the click through and or whatever type of call to action for that specific ad will be is a lot stronger because they're in the mindset of that.
This is so beyond hyper-focused targeted advertising. It's slightly mind-blowing when you really sit back and think about what you're talking about. So let's say I'm a middle market company. I'm not in the ad business, but I use digital advertising all the time. What should my expectation be if I'm talking to someone that has the type of capabilities? Hopefully I'm talking to you, right, at Classify. But what should my expectations be regarding how I'm going to be buying and measuring the media going forward? So I think you've kind of been dropping some breadcrumbs here about that, but let's tease that out a little bit further. What should my expectations be when I come to you in terms of how things have changed?
It's hard to quantify that answer specifically, and I don't want to set specific expectations, but I do think measurement is incredibly important, and then outcomes and value is incredibly important. And there are some legacy companies that have been doing this a long time that are just kind of used to having people come to them, because they've built the systems and they've kind of gated things, and like they are incumbent. And a lot of newer companies, and I make a decent amount of time to just explore who are all the new folks in the ecosystem today. And there's a lot of companies that have popped up in the last 12 to 18 months that are building really cool tech. And we're coming at it through this lens of how do we design tech that's actually meaningful and creates value. So when you're chatting with some of the whatever technology companies that you're working with to do targeting or to do measurement, to run ad campaigns, spend time helping those folks understand what your actual problems are. We do a lot of this too, which is I don't just want to sell you something that I've built. I want to understand what your problems are. And then, if our tool, if what we've built is helpful, great, let's use it today. But I also really want to get feedback about how we make it like really valuable for you, reducing time, delivering the best outcomes and value, so that that's something that we can just replicate as we continue building. So it's always kind of our job, and it should be any job of anybody on the commercial or the product side at any company that does targeting, like you mentioned, measurement, anybody in this landscape, to just treat your job like a consultant, and how do you make your client's lives easier. And, we just, at the end of the day, want to build the best tools and best products that just make it really easy for your life. When you wake up in the morning, I want to run ads. Cool. Let's not make this a really complicated thing. Let's make this as easy for you as possible.
Yeah. I think you occupy an extremely unique vantage point here. And I think you've made an excellent case for where the industry is going and positioning and building Classify to address, as Gretzky would say, where the puck is going to be, right? So from my perspective, you're on target with that. And if you are on target with that, and I'm correct and you're correct, then that means that you are going to have some rapid scaling to deal with, both in terms of industry expectation as well as demand for your platform. You've got some experience with this. You helped scale the Facebook audience network to 3 billion. You then worked on Unity's IPO before you founded Classify. So I'm interested in the lessons that you learned about building at scale that influenced this approach here with Classify, because I think those lessons may become critically important for you in the not too distant future.
You're absolutely right. It's kind of finding that delicate balance. Back to your question about what other applications that we have, knowing when to say no, or at least no for now. My grandfather used to say bye for now every time he would leave a conversation. It was never a definitive bye forever, but bye for now. I think no for now is probably a really good answer to that, knowing that there's a lot of stuff we want to do. We just don't have the resource to focus on everything, and we're not going to be great at the things that we're already started building if we get too distracted and try to keep changing our focus. So for scaling, I think it's finding a delicate balance of keeping a really close eye, not only keeping an eye on the industry, but helping to shape the industry and designing some of these new technologies that will be the future of how all these different systems connect is an important piece. Two, being really good at knowing who our clients are and how are we continuing to just iterate and polish and refine our product in a way that continues to increase the value that we're creating. And then three, scaling a team, right? And over time, you kind of start with a wide aperture of supporting, different types of clients. And the deeper you get into it, having very specific experts in the pharmaceutical space and in the finance space and in specific areas that are really helpful. So having the right people involved that are just product experts and or industry experts that can kind of help steer the narrative and shape the product in areas that are useful to those specific industries, is a really important piece to the puzzle. But it's also being deliberate and kind of strategic and building out that strategy to be nimble. This is a lot of very ambiguous answer to this question, because I think the playbook is more of a framework for how do you think about it, how do you acquire knowledge. And my quick favorite analogy, just to go back and wrap up this long-winded answer, is one of my favorite games as a kid, video games, was Age of Empires.
Oh, yeah.
You familiar with that one?
I'm a Civilization guy myself, but yes, I know Age of Empires.
Civ, Age of Empires, very similar. And, you kind of start off with very limited resources and, a map that you can't see the entire map. But over time, you acquire more resources. And if you're, effective in knowing how to reinvest those resources and expand out your map, when you start, you don't know what the whole map looks like. And that's kind of this journey right now of, I think, all of us in this new AI space, and especially in the advertising landscape. We don't know what the whole map's going to look like in the next 12 months. But if we're all effective collectively in making the right investments, building out our assets, and kind of expanding the map as we go, and also being collaborative, we are going to continue to design systems that are really effective and create a lot of value for our clients.
Mm-hmm. I loved your point about no for now. Your grandfather bye for now sounds like a wise man. I find a lot of leaders that are out there chasing squirrels. So that no for now, I think, is a good bumper sticker for them. Um, two follow up questions here regarding your experiences. I think that this would benefit a lot of folks that listen to our show. In your experience, what did Facebook get right about growth that other companies are struggling with? What did you see there that they got right?
There were a lot of luxuries that we had. Some of those luxuries were just an insanely talented engineering product. Like everybody there was really bought into this mission. And I got to be there during some of the golden years of 2014 to 19, pre-Cambridge Analytica, um, pre-starting to erode a lot of that trust with users. But they got right in really thinking about the whole funnel. So they owned, and operated all the inventory across Facebook and Messenger and WhatsApp and Instagram. And then the product that I worked on was Audience Network, which was about extending that capability out into the third-party mobile app ecosystem. I think that they got right, though, if you go back to the actual product itself, the ability to show up as an advertiser. And so self-serve, really important. Self-serve plus managed services. So anybody can start with a Facebook campaign. And this is now going to sound like a commercial because I do think it is one of the best, ad platforms still. But anybody can show up with the campaign, and I forget what the exact minimum is today, but $20 or $50 a month. You can run maybe it's 10. You can run a very small budget campaign with incredible targeting, and it includes a lot of the things that individual companies outside of Facebook are all building, externally. So like we're building contextual targeting. Other companies and other friends that have startups in our space are doing audience targeting or dynamic creative optimization. There's all kinds of other interesting components. Facebook had built that entire platform. And the ability to run creative, run targeting, like do optimization. And I think if you really want to get into the secret sauce of like what they do incredibly well, it's not just targeting. It's actually the ongoing optimization of knowing in their algorithm when you're running a campaign, what's working, what's not working across a whole bunch of different signals, including who the people are, where you're serving that ad, what the context is that ad is showing up against, and then using those signals and kind of feeding that back into the optimization engine to know within delivery, like what's working really well and what's not working really well, so that you can just continuously focus on the things that are working well. And it's a parallel to even company building right now. It's like I am kind of operating my own, or we as a team of founders are operating our own optimization algorithm. It's trying to reduce the energy into things that are not working well and increase the energy and assets into things that are working well. It's the same thing with running ad campaigns. So the more data you have, the more sophistication around your signals, the more sophistication you have around understanding, all the different variables that come into why campaigns work or don't work, and then continuously optimizing those things. Facebook has absolutely the scale to do that. I think that they just released some hardware, some AI literally in the chip level to make it, 10 or 100 or 1,000 times more efficient and faster. And it's really that kind of arms race towards having the best software, but now also, electricity and also hardware that enables that software to just be faster and make better decisions.
I appreciate the thoroughness of your answer there, and you teased this a little bit, but now I want to flip the script. So you told me what they got right. What did they get wrong? I don't want you to tell secrets here, but what did they get wrong, or what did you see that made you think, hey, you know what? I'm doing this differently over at my own organization? Because a lot of times I know the best lessons I have learned were the negative lessons from where I was and made me want to do things differently in my own world.
It's similar to what Google, I think, got wrong. And that's not really being empathetic. It's getting so big and so powerful that you just stopped listening and caring about, what your clients thought because they had to rely on you. And I think that that's always a bad position to be in. Um, for example, I think my first, I don't know, 6 months or so, I got asked by a friend on a different team to step onto this panel representing Facebook about instant articles to a room of a few hundred C-level executives at independent magazine publishers. And everybody from the largest magazine publishers in the world were all in this room. There were 3 or 4 other tech people, but I was the only, t-shirt, hoodie, Facebook representative up on this panel. And nobody cared. No offense to the other folks on the panel, but all the questions, everything was directed at me and daggers. Like if they had had things to throw at me, they would have been throwing things at me because they were so angry that instant articles, which was a product to basically grab content and then resurface that content inside of Facebook Messenger or inside the Facebook ecosystem. What they hadn't done is they hadn't, I don't know what work, because I didn't actually work on that product. I got asked to talk about it, strangely. How I defended it was talking about, what I chatted about with earlier with respect to like good journalism and the actual words, the content itself that's created. I still don't know how much it matters, and this is like a up for debate discussion, but like where that gets surfaced, whether it's in a mobile app, whether it's on a web page, whether that's on a piece of paper, whether that's in an LLM, whatever that looks like, as long as the people creating it are fairly compensated and have access to the right data, I don't know how much that. I'll be cautious in how I answer that question because I believe in publisher protection, absolutely, and I think that that's one thing that Facebook did not do a good job of was proactively working with the publishers that they were building a product for, to work with them on getting alignment and understanding what they wanted and needed to support their business in a scalable way. I think that Google, this big antitrust case right now, that's about to wrap up, they also hadn't been doing that. They got so big that they just said, we'll do whatever we want. And it created a lot of, problem in the ecosystem. Even though they built a very powerful and effective system, they didn't have the empathy to really understand who the clients were in the ecosystem and what they wanted. So I think that that's probably one thing that, I don't know, both of these companies could have done a much better job of. And then also from a marketing and just a general level of like trust standpoint, do a better job of engaging people in the conversation and not making it so adversarial. We've got the best tool, you're just going to use us. Great. Like, let's be collaborative and figure out ways to elevate stories. And one of the things that I did like about every Facebook Friday, and this is, I got like years ago, I don't know if it still exists, we would have a little 5-minute video of people using the product to organize, some group of random people who had dealt with something in life would organize on Facebook, and we got this very, cool lady type of video to get us all excited about the product. I think that there's probably a big opportunity for folks outside of those two companies, whether it continues to be a bunch of fragmented SSPs, DSPs, data providers, measurement providers, or whether there start to be more like platform type of companies, whatever that looks like. Doing more work to help advertisers and publishers to build that trust, I think will be really important, and that's the area that Facebook, Google kind of missed out on. I think there's an opportunity to focus on that and to elevate the stories of our clients.
Excellent. All right. Our time here is running to a close. So I'm interested here in two things. So the first thing I'm interested in is what's one other piece of practical advice that you'd give a mid-market CEO who's heard about all the AI hype but doesn't know where to start? What would you tell them?
One, I'd be happy to chat.
That's the right answer, number one. Love it.
To it can be overwhelming to think about all these new tools. So just a lot of research. I mean, listen to great podcasts like yours, and try to get involved in the community and, dedicate some amount of time to understanding what these new tools are, how they work, bringing in experts, listening to the folks that are building the tools. And, I think that in itself is just important to just be aware of the industry trends.
I think that's a very good piece of advice. And are there any quick wins that you've seen? Any low-hanging fruit that demonstrates value without massive investment?
I mean, if I go back to like pitching us,
well, one of the things I was actually going to ask you for was a 30-second commercial on Classify. If we were going to run a 30-second spot, what would that sound like?
I think it would sound like if you are running ad campaigns in the DSP, SSP world of having a deal ID, and you have the ability to support that type of budget. Working with this new era of contextual providers where we can get really precise around URL by URL, we're seeing pretty massive lifts in click-through rates and pretty massive lifts in conversions. And starting to layer that in is really important. So one, would be happy to chat about that. One, first and foremost for Classify. Two, there are just a bunch of cool new tools out there. So continuing to stay involved and just be aware of the industry and how it's going to evolve over the next 12 months. I think it'll be a very different looking space in 12 months than it is today.
I think that's good. Anything that you're particularly excited about when we look out on that 12-month horizon that you've seen or that you're thinking about?
Just the speed of development. It's been fairly stagnant with a lot of the same kind of tools for a long time. And the rapid pace of acceleration of like technology development is exciting, and it's a really cool time to be in the space.
I agree. All right. For our listeners that want to learn more about you, your work, the work that Classify is doing, your offerings, they want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Feel free to email us at hello@tryclassify.com. Go to our website, go to our LinkedIn, get in touch, and we'd love to connect.
Perfect. I really enjoyed our conversation today, Brendan. I think that you are operating at a really interesting intersection here at a really interesting time, and I appreciate you sharing the insights that you've gained with our audience today. I know that there were a lot of valuable takeaways. I know we got down into some technical weeds at certain points. Hopefully, folks didn't have any difficulty following any of that. But if they did, tryclassify.com, right?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chad.
And for our listeners, thank you all for tuning into AI for the C-Suite once again, where we are committed to helping middle market leaders thrive during the exponential age. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on all the socials, and visit our site, aifortheCsuite.com. Join us next time as we continue to unlock the potential of AI for your organization. And until then, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Take care, everybody.